Anfinsen, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his work on ribonuclease, especially concerning the connection between the amino acid sequence and the biologically active conformation, and Stanford Moore and William H. Stein, both United States, for their contribution to the understanding of the connection between chemical structure and catalytic activity of the active center of the ribonuclease molecule. Together, these three scientists uncovered the structure of the ribonuclease enzyme. And they were able to gain insight into how its structure related to its reactivity. In particular, Moore and Stein were able to correlate the structure of the enzyme's active site to its reactivity. Not only was ribonuclease an important enzyme to study, but their approach paved the way for similar studies to come.
What is valence bond theory?
Valence bond theory is one of two main theories. The other being molecular orbital theory, that is used to explain bonding in molecules. Valence bond theory explains bonding by describing the interactions of atomic orbitals on individual atoms as they come together to form chemical bonds. The basic idea is that orbitals with the right shapes to overlap strongly with each other will form the strongest chemical bonds. Today, valence bond theory's description of chemical bonding based on atomic orbitals has become less popular in favor of molecular orbital theory.
What is the law of definite proportions?
The law of definite proportions says that a substance always contains the same proportions of each element of which it's composed. For example, a molecule of water, H2O, always contains 2 hydrogen atoms for every oxygen atom. This is commonly understood among modern chemists. But it was an important step in working toward a microscopic understanding of the composition of matter. The first to make such claims, in the early 1800s, was the French chemist Joseph Proust. It was a controversial idea at that time. And other chemists believed that elements could be combined in any proportion.
So why are you sleepy after Thanksgiving dinner?
It's not the turkey, but the extra servings of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, or sugars, cause your pancreas to release insulin. Insulin helps the body deal with the huge amount of sugar and amino acids you just consumed. But interestingly, it has no effect on tryptophan. So other amino acids are taken out of the bloodstream. And tryptophan is free to use the transporters to get into your brain, making you sleepy.
What makes something poisonous?
There are many ways to seriously disrupt our biological machine. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin and prevents oxygen from getting to our cells. Cyanide shuts down the production of ATP in mitochondria. Hemlock is a weed that contains a mixture of at least 8 rather toxic molecules that target the nervous system. Thallium ions, Tl+, are particularly toxic because they are highly water-soluble and once in the body, they bind to ion channels and disrupt other processes that normally function with potassium ions, K+.
Why did Ernst Otto Fischer, Federal Republic of Germany, and Geoffrey Wilkinson, United Kingdom, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For their pioneering work, performed independently on the chemistry of the organometallic, so-called sandwich compounds. Fischer and Wilkinson received the prize for their role in elucidating the basic properties surrounding bonding and reactivity in organometallic complexes, with a particular focus on their work with organometallic sandwich compounds, which involve a metal center sandwiched between two ligands. This prize was somewhat special in that it was openly recognized that the practical implications of their work were not readily obvious, but that the knowledge surrounding organometallic chemistry gained from their work would be invaluable to chemists in the future. Why did Paul J.
What is liquid smoke?
It's actually exactly what it sounds like, as crazy as that is. Smoke from a wood-burning fire is blown into condensers, which collect many of the volatile chemicals in smoke. This mixture is then diluted with water. It's used to cure bacon and flavor many other foods.
Why did Wilhelm Ostwald, Germany, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his work on catalysis and for his investigations into the fundamental principles governing chemical equilibria and rates of reaction. Ostwald performed many experiments surrounding the strengths of acids and bases and was the first to carefully explore how reaction rates are affected by acid/base catalysis. He was actually the first to coin the term catalysis in the context of chemistry. And his definition of catalysis is still very much the same as the one used today. Ostwald's work corroborated earlier studies into acid/base chemistry by Arrhenius, and his measurement of chemical reaction rates under various acidic and basic conditions placed the understanding of Brønsted-Lowry acids and bases on a more sound footing. Ostwald also expanded the scope of his study beyond acid/base catalysis and his work led to the understanding of chemical reaction rates as we know them today. He showed that chemical reaction rates did and the factors that influenced them did were quantitatively measurable parameters.
What is the pH?
A measure of the hydrogen ion concentration of a solution.
Why did Manfred Eigen, Federal Republic of Germany, Ronald George Rayford Norrish, United Kingdom, and George Porter, United Kingdom, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For their studies of extremely fast chemical reactions effected by disturbing the equilibrium by means of very short pulses of energy. Norrish and Porter were credited with the prize for their development of flash photolysis methods, which applied short pulses of light to initiate photochemical reactions, allowing them to study very fast chemical reactions that could not previously be observed. Eigen's work differed in that he used sound as his form of energy to probe the chemical reactions, which is far less invasive of an approach in the sense that sound does not cause drastic changes in the behavior of the molecules being studied. Of the two methods, the flash photolysis method is much more akin to the modern spectroscopic approaches used today, while sound-based approaches did not gain as much traction.
What is the transition state for a reaction?
The transition state of a chemical reaction is the highest energy structure through which the reactant molecule, S, must pass to complete the reaction. Since this is the highest energy point along the path of the reaction, this configuration is the most difficult to reach along the reaction path and thus the energy barrier to reach the transition state limits how quickly the reaction can proceed.
What is a transition metal?
Typically, this refers to any element in the D block, groups 3 through 12, of the periodic table.
What is a geometric isomer?
Geometric isomers are molecules containing the same set of atoms and bonding arrangements, but with a different spatial arrangement of the atoms or groups. For example, cis and trans isomers are an example of geometric isomers.
What is the biggest laser in the world?
The largest laser in the world is located at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in Livermore, California. This laser is so large that it covers the size of 3 football fields. The scientists who use this giant laser for their research are hoping to show that a nuclear fusion reaction, see nuclear chemistry, can be controlled and used as a source of energy. If that's possible, it could revolutionize the way power plants make energy.
How does mass spectrometry, MS, work?
The purpose of mass spectrometry is to ionize a chemical sample, causing it to fragment, and to characterize the mass of the fragment ions that form to gain chemical information about the sample. The first thing that happens is that the sample molecules need to be ionized. And this is done by removing an electron from the sample to yield a positively charged species. Once ionized, a sample of molecules will typically fragment in a characteristic way. The ions that form, whether they are fragments or the original ionized species, are accelerated and then deflected in a magnetic field. Ions of different masses are deflected by different amounts. And this is how the masses of the different ions are distinguished.
What metals are used as probe agents in biological systems?
Yttrium, technetium, gold, silver, platinum, mercury, and gadolinium are used as probe agents in biological systems.
Are only small main group elements detectable by NMR?
The list of nuclei in the previous question are just commonly used ones in NMR experiments. Other elements are observable, but sometimes these require special hardware to obtain useful signal levels.
How do pop rocks, candy work?
Pop rocks, is a carbonated candy like soda is a carbonated beverage. The fizzing that goes on in your mouth is due to carbon dioxide, CO2, bubbles escaping from the candy. To make this unique treat, the ingredients are heated, exposed to high pressures of carbon dioxide, and then cooled to trap the CO2 inside the candy.
What is an anion?
A negatively charged ion.
How do hydrogen-powered cars get their energy?
Hydrogen-powered cars are based on fuel cells that store hydrogen, or H2 gas, inside a material called a polymer exchange membrane. The fuel cell contains 2 electrodes, an anode, negative side, and a cathode, positive side. At the anode, the H2 molecules are split into protons and electrons. The protons pass through a polymer exchange membrane, while the electrons are unable to pass through this membrane and thus have to flow in a different direction. This creates a current of electricity by which the car is powered.
How do ants know how to organize their colonies so efficiently?
Ants use a set of pheromones to communicate information between individual members of the colony. There are different chemical markers that indicate trails to food. Alarm pheromones that are released when an ant is killed, and a number are used in the reproductive process. Some ant colonies even use pheromones to trick enemy colonies into attacking themselves, or to convince the opposition into becoming worker ants for their own benefit.
Why did Vincent Duvinaud, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his work on biochemically important sulfur compounds, especially for the first synthesis of a polypeptide hormone. Duvinaud was known for bridging the fields of organic and biochemistry by synthesizing biochemically relevant compounds. He synthesized the first polypeptide hormone and developed knowledge of the chemistry surrounding peptides, especially those containing sulfur. In early experiments on the posterior lobe of the brain, Duvinaud had noted the high percentage of sulfur present, prompting his career-long investigation into the correlation of sulfur with biological activity.
What polymers are found in nature?
There are a ton. Proteins, enzymes, cellulose, starch, and silk are all polymers.
What's a solvent?
In chemistry, a solvent is a liquid, though it can be a gas or a solid. But forget about that for now, that other chemicals are dissolved in. These other chemicals can be called the solute. The solute and the solvent can together be called a solution. Take salt water, water is the solvent, salt is the solute. And we can refer to the salt water as a solution.
What causes non-stick pans to be non-adhesive?
Non-stick pans and other surfaces are coated with a polymer that does not interact strongly with other surfaces, hence, no sticking. Teflon, R, developed by DuPont, R, in the 1940s, is most frequently used for this application. Teflon, R, is a polymer of tetrafluoroethylene, which is very hydrophobic. So water or any other substance, like food, doesn't stick to it. More recently, other polymers have also been developed for this application. Thermalin, R, is a silicon oxide polymer with some similar properties to Teflon, R. And Ecolon, R, is a nylon-based product that is reinforced with ceramics for toughness.
What is a bond enthalpy?
Bond enthalpy refers to the amount of energy it takes to break a chemical bond. This tells us how favorable a chemical bond is relative to the separation of the two fragments on either side of the bond.
What is an example of a multi-step chemical reaction?
Many reactions in biological chemistry, see also biochemistry, are multi-step chemical reactions. Glycolysis, which is the process of breaking down sugar to generate energy. For example, involves 10 sequential steps. Each step is carried out by a special type of catalyst, called an enzyme. There are countless multi-step processes in biological systems.
Why do helium balloons float?
Helium balloons float because helium is less dense than air. So gravity pulls down on air more than it does on the helium balloon. The difference in density is enough that the displaced air supports the weight of the balloon and makes it float, up, and away.
How does a microwave work?
Microwaves work by using a process called dielectric heating. The microwave surrounds your food in a field of electromagnetic radiation that is constantly changing directions. The polar molecules in your food, particularly water, align their dipoles with the direction of this applied field. The constant shifting of the direction of this field causes the polar molecules to tumble around. And this molecular motion warms your food.
What is a d orbital?
An atomic orbital with an angular momentum quantum number of 2.
What is a nucleobase?
Nitrogen-containing molecules that form nucleic acids, adenine, cytosine, guanine, thymine. Uracil are the major nucleobases, form base pairs via hydrogen bonding between the two helical strands of DNA.
Why did Kenichi Fukui, Japan, and Roald Hoffmann, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For their theories, developed independently, concerning the course of chemical reactions. Fukui can be credited for the development of frontier molecular orbital theory, which provides predictions surrounding the reactivity of compounds based on the nature of their most loosely bound electrons, or highest energy occupied orbitals, along with the nature of their lowest energy unoccupied orbitals. Hoffmann had completed some significant theoretical work while working with Woodward years earlier, and had reached conclusions surrounding the relationship between chemical reactions and the symmetry of the orbitals involved in those reactions. Both of these great scientists succeeded in approaching rather difficult problems by attempting to look for generalizations, simplifications, and basic patterns that were common among their observations.
Why is the process of manufacturing ibuprofen an excellent example of green synthesis?
The modern industrial-scale synthesis of ibuprofen has very high atom efficiency, and it has been modified from the original synthesis to be both more environmentally friendly and more cost-effective. The original method involved 6 synthetic steps but used stoichiometric, as opposed to catalytic, quantities of reagents, had lower atom efficiency, and produced undesirable quantities of waste. The modern alternative, on the other hand, requires just 3 steps, each of which is catalytic in nature. The first step employs a recyclable catalyst, hydrogen fluoride, HF, and produces almost no waste. The second and third steps each achieve 100% atom efficiency, wow! This process truly represents an ideal benchmark for excellence in green synthesis on the industrial scale.
What types of energy levels exist in molecules?
There are 3 main types of energy levels that physical chemists are concerned with. These are electronic, vibrational, and rotational energies. Changes in electronic energy levels occur when an electron undergoes a transition from one molecular orbital to another. Vibrational energy levels are associated with vibrations of chemical bonds in the molecule, and rotational energy levels involve the molecule rotating in space. As you could probably guess, atoms don't have vibrational energy levels since there aren't chemical bonds present in single atoms. Physical chemists can often learn about the structure and reactivity of molecules by studying the transitions between these energy levels.
Anfinson, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
for his work on ribonuclease, especially concerning the connection between the amino acid sequence and the biologically active conformation, and Stanford Moore and William H. Stein, both United States, for their contribution to the understanding of the connection between chemical structure and catalytic activity of the active center of the ribonuclease molecule. Together, these three scientists uncovered the structure of the ribonuclease enzyme. And they were able to gain insight into how its structure related to its reactivity. In particular, Moore and Stein were able to correlate the structure of the enzyme's active site to its reactivity. Not only was ribonuclease an important enzyme to study, but their approach paved the way for similar studies to come.
What is the rate determining step?
The slowest step in a multiple-step chemical process. Usually the step with the highest energy transition state.
How does ethanol work as a fuel?
Ethanol works as a fuel in much the same way as gasoline. It is burned in a combustion reaction to release energy. In automobiles, ethanol is usually mixed with gasoline.
What is a bimolecular substitution reaction?
From the last answer, you can probably guess that a bimolecular substitution reaction has two molecules, molecular, in the transition state. This means that the slowest step involves two molecules interacting. In the previous example, there was only one. Let's look at a similar substitution reaction, but instead of T-buletin Cl, we'll react hydroxide with MeCl. Here the nucleophile, O, directly displaces the leaving group Cl, without forming a carbocation intermediate. This is because the methyl cation CH3 stable than the tert-butyl carbocation formed in the previous question.
What is specific heat?
The quantity of heat energy needed to increase the temperature of a substance by a fixed amount.
Why would anyone add carbon monoxide to tuna?
Cutting a tuna fish exposes many muscle cells to oxygen, which slowly changes the bright red color of fresh tuna steaks to a darker brown. This is the result of iron-containing enzymes, myoglobin and hemoglobin, being oxidized from Fe2 to Fe3. Sushi lovers have come to understand that fresh raw tuna should be bright red and are skeptical of eating any brown-colored fish. The seafood industry figured out at some point that adding CO during the packaging step not only slows the rate of oxidation down, which increases shelf life, but also brightens the red color. It does this because CO binds more strongly to the Fe2 center than Fe3. The risk to consumers is not CO exposure here, but that you might be fooled into eating fish that isn't as fresh as you might otherwise think if you judge its freshness based on color.
What fraction of atoms are empty space?
The fraction of an atom that is occupied by empty space is very large. In fact, over 99.9% of atoms are empty space. The protons, neutrons, and electrons are incredibly small. And the atom occupies such a relatively large effective volume because of the delocalized electron cloud around the nucleus.
Are all the carbon-carbon bonds in benzene the same length?
Yes, but you might not think so by looking at a single line structure of benzene. The actual structure of benzene is a combination of two structures, shown below.
What is nucleation?
A process through which a crystal, or a drop of liquid, grows around a small site.
Does every compound have a unique boiling point?
No, and this is one limitation of distillation as a separation technique. If two chemicals coincidentally have very similar boiling points, then it will be difficult to separate them using distillation.
What does the city of Miletus have to do with chemistry?
Miletus, one of the Greeks' greatest cities, was located on the western coast of what is now Turkey and was home to where some of the earliest ideas about chemistry were recorded. During the 6th century BCE, the Milesian school of thought was founded, and the musings of three philosophers survived into the modern era: Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. Thales thought the most basic building block of the universe was water and that the earth floated on top of this celestial water. Anaximander challenged both of these ideas, proposing that the universe was born when fire and water, or hot and cold, separated from one another and that the earth simply floated on nothing.
What is a chiral center?
An atom whose arrangement of substituents is non-superimposable with its mirror image.
What is the Le Chatelier's principle?
States that any change, concentration, pressure, temperature, volume, to a chemical system at equilibrium will cause the equilibrium to shift in order to counteract that change.
What is LDPE, low-density polyethylene?
If the density of a polyethylene is between 0.91 to 0.94 g/cm3, yes. There's a little overlap in these ranges, it's called low-density polyethylene. To get to this density, the polyethylene chains have more branching than in HDPE, but still only a few percent of the atoms along an entire chain. These branches prevent the chains from stacking together quite as well, which makes the material softer and more flexible. With those properties, LDPE finds use as trash, grocery, and sandwich bags. And that clingy food wrap, although the original Saran wrap was not LDPE, see below.
What does hydrophilic mean?
A molecule that interacts favorably with or is attracted to water. Typically via hydrogen bonding or other dipolar interactions.
What is a molecular orbital?
A mathematical equation describing the position of an electronic in a molecule.
Where does rubber come from?
Rubber trees. No kidding. Natural rubber is collected from rubber trees, like maple syrup comes from maple trees. Except the syrup is latex sap. It's a polymer of isoprene where each carbon-carbon double bond along the chain has cis stereochemistry. Although there are man-made alternatives produced artificially. Even today about half of the rubber produced each year on our planet does come from rubber trees.
Why does salt melt ice?
Adding salt to ice lowers the melting point of water. See freezing point depression in macroscopic properties. So when you pour salt on the ice on your driveway, the melting point of the salt water mixture you made by adding the salt may be lowered sufficiently such that it is below the outside temperature, which means the solid ice will start to melt.
What is a band gap?
The band gap for a material is the difference in energy between the valence band and the conduction band. This number tells you how good of a conductor a material is. The smaller the band gap, or the less energy, it takes to promote an electron from the filled to the empty orbitals. The better the material can conduct electrons.
What is a chromatography?
A process to separate mixtures, generally by differing affinities of to a solid stationary phase.
What is natural gas, and where does it come from?
Natural gas is primarily composed of methane, CH4, and like other hydrocarbons. Methane provides energy via combustion reactions. Natural gas is typically found underground, near sources of petroleum, and can be pumped up via pipelines. Actually, natural gas does not have a smell, so it is mixed with a small amount of a strong-smelling thiol compound so that you can tell if you have a gas leak in your home.
What is neuroscience?
Neuroscience refers to science that studies the way the brain and nervous system works.
How can light be used to initiate a chemical reaction?
When light strikes a molecule, it has the potential to excite an electron to a higher energy level. When this happens, the molecule becomes less stable and more reactive. This can even cause the molecule to fragment, generating a more reactive species or catalyst, which can then go on to react with another molecule.
Are there alternate theories to the Big Bang Theory out there?
There sure are. While the Big Bang Theory is probably the most widely known and accepted theory surrounding the origins of the current universe, there are still other theories being explored and proposed. Some of these are much more scientifically feasible than others. Take a look around the web and you can find lots of different ideas out there. One alternative that has received notable attention describes the universe as a continuous cycle of expansion and rebirth. The expansion period, similar to that described in the Big Bang, is followed by a period in which the universe once again becomes a dense mass of condensed matter, and then the expansion begins again.
Why did Otto Wallach, Germany, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
for his services to organic chemistry and the chemical industry. By his pioneer work in the field of alicyclic compounds. Alicyclic compounds are aliphatic, meaning they have no aromatic rings. And cyclic, meaning they do have other rings. Cyclohexane is a simple example of an alicyclic compound. Wallach specifically studied terpenes, which are found in the essential oils of various plants. He was able through chemical transformation to make these liquid molecules into crystalline solids, which made them easier to study with the methods available at the time. Wallach is also known for a number of different organic reactions that all still bear his name today. Wallach rearrangement, Wallach's rule, Wallach degradation, Lückert-Wallach reaction.
Why did Paul J. Crutzen, the Netherlands, Mario J. Molina, Mexico/United States, and F. Sherwood Rowland, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For their work in atmospheric chemistry, particularly concerning the formation and decomposition of ozone. Each of these researchers made important contributions toward understanding how atmospheric ozone is depleted through atmospheric reactions. Importantly, each demonstrated ways in which pollution from humans was responsible for depleting the ozone layer. And they did this by learning how atmospheric pollutants caused the breakdown of ozone. This information will hopefully continue to help us protect the ozone layer and the stability of the Earth's climate.
Why do old library books begin to smell after sitting on shelves for years?
The smell of old books is due to hundreds of volatile organic compounds that form from the slow degradation of the book's paper and other materials used in its construction. Acetic acid, vinegar, and furfural, smells like almonds, are two common chemicals ascribed to the smell of old books. Scientists can analyze the volatile compounds to identify the materials used without having to destroy a part of the historical document.
What are hydrocarbons, and how many different ones are there?
Hydrocarbons, as you might have figured out from the name, are molecules that contain only hydrogen and carbon atoms. There are literally an infinite number of ways to arrange these two elements together. Especially if you include polymers, see polymer chemistry. Hydrocarbons are important molecules. Different sizes and types of hydrocarbons are known as natural gas, gasoline, waxes, like candles, and plastics.
What happens when you fire a wet clay pot in a kiln?
Before the clay is placed in the kiln, it is usually dried in the air for at least several days. This first step has already removed the majority of the water. But there will still be some trapped inside the clay. As it is heated in the kiln, the remaining water will turn to steam as it evaporates from the clay. If it is heated too fast, it may turn to steam while still trapped in the clay and cause the pot to explode. As the pot continues to heat, some of the organic materials in the clay will burn off, which is necessary for the clay to form a strong final structure. The next stage is an interesting one. And to understand it, we need to consider the chemical composition of clay. Clay consists of a unit of alumina, Al2O3, and 2 units of silica, SiO2, complexed with 2 molecules of water. So even after all of the excess water has evaporated away, there is still a significant quantity of water that remains chemically bonded within the clay. At this point, water accounts for about 14% of the mass of the clay. As the temperature continues to increase, those remaining water molecules begin to be released, and they too evaporate away. This is another step where the heating must be done slowly. Otherwise, the water can create steam pockets within the clay that will expand and eventually explode. Other changes occur as well, such as changes in the crystalline structure of the silica that will occur multiple times as the pot is heated. Eventually, the glass-making oxides within the clay melt, and the clay will fuse into a ceramic material. The materials that melt relatively easily will tend to fill in remaining empty spaces, strengthening the final product. One final note is that changes in the crystalline structure of the silica will also occur upon cooling. And one must take care to cool the pot sufficiently slowly so that these changes don't cause cracks to develop during cooling.
What is biochemistry?
Biochemistry is the field focused on elucidating and explaining the complex chemical processes that take place in biological systems. It's a diverse field, drawing on aspects from virtually every other subfield of chemistry to explain the molecular processes that drive living things. Often, biochemists study complex reaction sequences and catalytic processes involving molecules much larger than those routinely encountered in other subfields of chemistry. A few topics commonly encountered in biochemistry include studying how our cells obtain energy, understanding how our genetic material, DNA, dictates who we are, and explaining how our body regulates and stores nutrients from the foods we eat.
What is a band gap?
The energy range separating the top of the valence band and the bottom of the conduction band in a semiconductor.
How is the presence of illegal narcotics identified?
Analytical chemists have developed simple chemical tests that can identify the presence of illegal drugs within seconds. Law enforcement officers routinely use these when they are unsure whether someone is in possession of an illegal narcotic. A common field test for cocaine, for example, uses a cobalt thiocyanate complex that turns blue in the presence of cocaine.
Are green, oolong, and black teas made from different plants?
No, all tea is made from the leaves of a single plant, Camellia sinensis. That statement excludes herbal teas, though, which are more accurately called infusions. Different categories of tea are prepared using different processes of wilting, bruising, and drying the leaves. Green tea is processed within a day or two of harvest, which preserves the natural chemicals of the fresh leaves. Black tea leaves are prepared by an oxidation process at high temperature and humidity, and then dried. Oolong tea is in between green and black, the leaves are left for a few days to wither, after which a short oxidation process is performed.
There are polymers in my shampoo and conditioner, too?
There are many ingredients in shampoos and conditioners are similar to most soaps, surfactants, etc., but cationic polymers play important roles in these products. One family of these polymers is named polyquaterniums, which is closer to a trade name than a technical chemistry name. The structure of one member of this family, polyquaternium 1, is shown below. All of these polymers contain positive charges, which allows them to form ionic bonds with hair strands. This prevents the polymers from being rinsed away with water. Once coated, your hair strands are now less likely to stick to adjacent strands and appear shinier.
What is the focus of theoretical chemistry?
Theoretical chemistry is a branch of chemistry that, as the name suggests, develops and applies theories to explain chemical observations and also to make predictions about things chemists cannot directly study by experiment. Theoretical chemists work on a wide variety of problems that cover pretty much all of the other branches of chemistry. Two of the major subfields within theoretical chemistry are electronic structure theory and molecular dynamics.
Why might a soft drink freeze when you open it?
Remember that the freezing point of a solution is decreased by having anything dissolved in it. When a soft drink is opened and CO2 rushes out, less CO2 is present in the solution, causing the freezing point of the solution to increase. So at a constant temperature, the increase in freezing point causes the soda to freeze. If you haven't seen this happen, you can try to make it happen by placing a soda in the freezer for a while. But be careful not to leave it in too long or it might explode.
What is nuclear fusion?
Nuclear fusion is the process by which two nuclei combine to form a single, heavier nucleus. Energy is usually released when two lightweight nuclei fuse. Though for heavier nuclei, fusion generally requires an input of energy. Nuclear fusion can be used in bombs to cause a massive and rapid release of energy. Fusion is also responsible for the fact that stars burn bright and give off light and heat.
What fraction of power globally comes from renewable energy sources?
It is estimated that about 16% of global energy consumption currently comes from renewable resources. Hopefully this number will increase significantly in the near future.
What is the earliest historical evidence of the study of chemistry?
Although they didn't call it chemistry. People from ancient civilizations used chemical reactions in many aspects of their lives. Metalworking, including the extraction of pure metals from ores, and then combining metals to make alloys. Like bronze, left many artifacts of early man's chemistry experiments. Pottery, including the production and use of various glazes. Fermentation to make beer and wine, and pigments and dyes for cloth and cosmetics are all evidence that man has always been fascinated by the ability to change matter.
What is charcoal?
Charcoal is made of carbon and ash and is formed when water and other substances are removed from animals or plants. It can be produced by heating wood or other biologically derived materials in the absence of oxygen.
What is the parietal lobe for?
Your parietal lobe controls your speech, visual perception, pain, and touch perception. Spatial orientation, like knowing what direction is up, and other cognitive processes. As you can probably tell by now, there is some degree of overlap between the broad types of functions carried out by different parts of the brain.
What is an ohm?
Zero, the SI unit used to describe electrical resistance.
What was the Bhopal disaster?
The Bhopal disaster, also referred to as the Bhopal gas tragedy, was a gas leak in Bhopal, India, that happened in December of 1984. At the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, methyl isocyanate gas was accidentally released during a manufacturing process. The gas poisoned thousands of people in the surrounding city, most of whom were asleep when the gas leak occurred. The effects of the release of this gas were felt for years to come, with over 500,000 injuries reported in the nearly 3 decades since the incident. Following this accident, criminal and civil suits were filed against the company and several of its highest-ranking employees.
What is diffusion?
Diffusion is essentially the random motion of molecules, or atoms, through a medium. It causes the concentrations of species in a liquid or gas to even out across the accessible volume. Diffusive motions of molecules in a liquid or gas are typically responsible for the chance encounters that lead to bimolecular reactions.
What are the goals of green chemistry?
If you have read through the 12 principles of green chemistry, you will likely have realized that the focus of green chemistry rests on minimizing the impact of the development, manufacturing, and use of chemical products on the environment. While these 12 principles may not enumerate every possible method for reducing the impact of chemicals on the environment, they provide a foundation for the outcomes that green chemistry seeks to achieve.
What is the Big Bang Theory?
The Big Bang Theory is a model that attempts to explain how the universe was formed. This theory suggests that the universe as we know it came into existence a little less than 14 billion years ago, and that everything started from a very dense, hot state from which the universe as we know it began to expand. This theory is based on, and is consistent with, all of the current observations we have surrounding the known universe, such as the fact that it is expanding, or that there exists a large abundance of light elements in the universe. The one thing left unexplained by this theory, though, which you may likely be wondering about, is how that initial state came to be in the first place.
Why did Walter Kohn, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his development of the density functional theory, and John A. Popel, United Kingdom, for his development of computational methods in quantum chemistry. Kohn and Popel represent two of the founding fathers of modern computational chemistry methods. Density functional theory is a method that relies on the function describing the spatial electron density in a molecule to calculate molecular properties. And Kohn was awarded the prize for his substantial contributions to the development of this now widely used approach. Popel also made major strides toward making computational methods reliable and accessible to a large number of chemists. In addition to his more technical achievements, Popel is responsible for developing the Gaussian computational chemistry software that is probably the most widely used computational chemistry tool available today.
Why did Dan Shechtman, Israel, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For the discovery of quasi-crystals. In discovering quasi-crystals, Shechtman initially made some people think he was foolish and just plain wrong. Using a microscope, he found patterns of molecules that appeared to be packed in repeating patterns. But these were patterns that should not be allowed to repeat in a periodic way by simple arguments of geometry. This controversial discovery, and Shechtman's defense of what he observed, led to his being asked to leave his research group at the time of he made the initial discovery. After fighting a long battle, he eventually reached the point where his discovery was recognized. To date, quasi-crystals have not found too many important applications. But they have made scientists rethink the fundamental properties of solid matter, which is certainly a pretty big deal.
What is smog?
The word smog was originally derived from a combination of the words smoke and fog. And today it describes air pollution that, once in the atmosphere, reacts with sunlight to form additional pollutants. The main sources of this pollution are commonly motor vehicles, factories, power plants, and burning of fuels. The main chemical components of smog are ozone, nitric oxide, nitric dioxide, and volatile organic compounds. Smog is present in pretty much every large city around the world. It can be hazardous to human health and has been blamed for health problems and even deaths.
What is an amphoteric molecule?
An amphoteric molecule is one that can act as either an acid or a base. Either the Lewis or Bronsted definition of acid/base. Behavior can be used to define a species as amphoteric.
Do nuclear reactions take place in outer space?
Yes, inside stars. Nuclear reactions occur frequently in stars as hydrogen atoms undergo fusion to produce helium and eventually other heavier elements. Some additional, higher energy nuclear reactions also take place when two neutron stars merge.
Is everything made of molecules or atoms?
Basically, yes. The only material things that aren't made up of atoms or molecules are the subatomic particles that make up atoms. Anything you find around your house, office, or anywhere else is made of some combination of atoms that are on the periodic table.
What are some examples of naturally occurring molecules that affect our biochemistry?
Ascorbic acid, also known as vitamin C, plays an important role in keeping us healthy. It was isolated for the first time in 1932 from citrus fruits, oranges, lemons, limes, grapefruits, and can be synthesized naturally from D-glucose via two distinct biological pathways. The hydroxyl groups allow it to be soluble in water, i.e., in biologically relevant environments, and it is used as a coenzyme in the synthesis of collagen. Benzaldehyde is found in almonds, cherries, apricots, and peach pits. It is often used as an artificial oil of almond. Perhaps not surprisingly, in making perfumes, dyes, and food flavorings. Researchers are also continuing to look into its utility as a pesticide and anti-cancer agent. Benzaldehyde can be readily synthesized in the laboratory using toluene as a precursor. We all know about caffeine. For coffee drinkers, this is probably one of our favorite chemicals. In its pure form, caffeine is just another white crystalline powder. Though most people have probably never seen it that way. It's more commonly found in the cocoa plant, coffee beans, and tea leaves, where people have been consuming it for thousands of years. Historically, people have consumed caffeine to increase their heart rate, body temperature, mental alertness, and attention span. Today, people still use caffeine for most of the same reasons. Caffeine can be extracted using chemical solvents from sources like tea leaves and coffee beans to be used in other caffeinated products like soft drinks. Not to scare you, but it's worth mentioning that caffeine is a potentially addictive substance that stimulates the central nervous system, and if you consume too much at a given time, you may suffer from headaches, irritation, and insomnia. Calanolide A comes from a tree found in the rainforests of Malaysia. It was originally tested as an anti-cancer agent, but was found to be unsuccessful in this regard. However, Calinolide A has been found to be very effective in fighting the HIV-1 virus, which causes AIDS. Due to the rarity of this chemical, a synthesis was designed soon after its utility was realized. This drug acts by preventing the transcription of the viral RNA into DNA in a cell, which serves to prevent the HIV virus from replicating. Fortunately, it does this with relatively mild, and temporary, side effects. Dopamine is synthesized in our bodies from an amino acid precursor. It is an important neurotransmitter that balances our feelings of happiness. Imbalances or deficiencies in dopamine production or its regulation have been linked to a number of diseases, including Parkinson's disease, schizophrenia, and Tourette's syndrome. While dopamine was recognized for its role as a neurotransmitter in the 1950s, it took decades of research before its role was more completely understood. The work that led to its connection to the disorders we mentioned, and to an understanding of its exact function, was awarded a Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in the year 2000. An understanding of the role of dopamine in physiology has been extremely important in understanding several neurological diseases. Ethanol is a molecule you are probably familiar with. It's the alcohol found in alcoholic beverages that makes you feel intoxicated, and humans have consumed it for hundreds of years. Additionally, it is useful as a solvent, an antiseptic, a sedative, and a component in perfumes, lacquers, cosmetics, aerosols, antifreeze, and mouthwash. Ethanol can be produced from a raw feedstock, like corn or grain, by fermenting it in the presence of microbes, which can readily digest sugars and produce ethanol as a byproduct. Oxytocin is a hormone produced naturally in females' posterior pituitary glands, which are located at the back of the brain. It is responsible for causing lactation and uterine contractions in pregnant women. Oxytocin is also used to induce labor when a pregnancy does not begin on time naturally. Pyridoxal phosphate is more commonly known as vitamin B6. It helps your nerves and brain to function properly and to maintain the right chemical balances in your body. It is also necessary for the enzymatic reaction that frees up glucose, the sugar monomer, from glycogen, the sugar storage polymer. Vitamin B6 can be obtained from many types of foods including meats, grains, nuts, vegetables, and bananas. Quinine is a molecule that has been used to treat malaria and nighttime leg cramps as well. It was first discovered in South America, in the bark of a type of tree called the cinchona tree, by Spanish explorers, who used it as a medicine. The high demand for quinine eventually led to cinchona trees becoming very hard to find. But thankfully a synthetic method for its production was eventually developed. Succinic acid plays an important role in the Krebs cycle, and can deliver electrons to the electron transport chain. Succinic acid has been found in a very wide range of plant and animal tissues, though its purification challenged chemists for a long time before it was finally successfully purified from tissues. Today succinic acid can be produced readily in the laboratory. and one method even can use corn as a feedstock. In addition to its role in the Krebs cycle, succinic acid has been used as an intermediate in dyes, perfumes, paints, inks, and fibers.